we're up.
All right, good afternoon, Sharks. My name is Captain Allison Romeko from the 8th Fighter Squadron, and I'm here with Major Chris Brown. And we're here to tell you about how we can take consumer off-the-shelf technology and adapt that to our syllabus to train a better pilot. Overall, we want to change the paradigm with a human-centric focus. So we value the human as the most important asset that the Air Force has, and pilot training methods have not evolved with the advances of aircraft technology. 4th and 5th gen pilots are presented with a wealth of information, and the only limiting factor is our ability to process this, so we really need to target this. The bottom line is we want to train a better pilot, and we want to help mitigate the retention crisis by placing people first. Here are our current limitations on student training. We currently do not have a training device that integrates spatial 3D awareness, time, technical observation, and transportability or accessibility. So we aim to do that with this project. Our implementation timeline is immediate as soon as we get the equipment, up to 6 months for the more advanced elements of this project. What we're asking for this phase 1 cost is $300,000. That's broken down into 4 main components that we want to integrate into all 3 squadrons. First, we're asking for a VR camera that runs $3,000, and then VR cockpit trainers, briefing rooms, and content development is going to run a little bit less than $10,000 per implement. So at first thought, this might seem like a lot of money, but I would like to remind you that the average F-16 flight hour cost is $9,000. So for a student non-progression, which is a flight failure, that's going to cost a minimum of $18,000 to repeat that ride, up to $72,000 for our opposed sorties. What that translates to in a class of 16 is the S&P rate is about 3 per student. That adds 48 flights, which cost $900,000 per class. So over 1 year per squadron, that's almost $2 million. Our average S&P rate also has to be factored in for our IPUG students, which runs at about $180,000. So as you can see, if we can just minutely reduce our S&P rate, then this project is going to more than pay for itself. What do we gain overall? A better pilot. We integrate more realistic, immersive, and effective instruction. We capitalize on the gains made by Pilot Training Next, and we have increased throughput of students through a reduced S&P and reflight rate. An overall reduction of manpower required to make a student and individualized training. As a second order effect, we make a more capable wingman, which is then capable of an earlier upgrade, which increases efficiency in the CAF. So generally, to break down this program, how do we get here? We ask, how can we get here faster to where we have an experienced pilot? You can basically think of this as a modified OODA loop, just integrating those elements that are specific to pilot training. So you start out with some baseline factors, knowledge, and procedural memory. Procedural memory, which for the most part they're going to get from pilot training, knowing how to do basic flying tasks. But when they get here, there's a number of things that we also have to train them as well. And we want these to be automatic so that they can devote that active cognitive processing power towards perceiving, processing, and reacting to the dynamic environment. So first we take knowledge. The goal here is to minimize content loss through more realistic training. There's a number of places where information can be forgotten on its way to long-term memory, and so we want to use this technology to decrease those losses. So here's currently what we're looking at with our pubs. This is a stack of pubs that represents mainly a small portion of the textual data that you have to recognize. When I'm looking at this drawing right here, even though I know what I'm looking at, it's very difficult for me to interpret. I would have to look at it pretty closely to see what I'm actually looking at. Here's what the future looks like. A 3D interactive app that is on a mobile take-home application and also has a more advanced model in the squadron. So as you can see, here is a 3D locator. You can rotate around to see that from any view, and then you can go to an X-ray view where you see specifically where those components exist in space. And then additionally, if I want to push play and see exactly how the fuel gets from the fuel tank to the engine, I can see that play out in real time. Another way that we can use this is with weapons. So usually we see weapons for the first time when they're on the jet. But here we can interact with them in a 3D environment. You can learn about them, put in different fuses. In the future, we would have immersive, realistic content on demand. This is going to foster an exploratory mindset, and it's way easier to learn because ask any millennial what would they rather learn by, not this. They would rather pick up one of these and learn this information. Pratt & Whitney is already using this technology, teaching their engine mechanics, and the NQ-9s have a pilot program that includes this information. Another one of the issues that we have is we do a lot of 3D maneuvering, and this is very difficult to relate because right now we only have a 2D medium to present that information on. So we would like to teach 3D maneuvers in a 3D space. One of the ways that we can do this is by rendering F-16 3D video from the cockpit, so that's where the camera comes into play, and we can also use 3D drawing apps to actually draw a 3D picture to replace our current 2D whiteboard drawing. How this helps us out is it's very difficult for a new student to translate a 2D space to a 3D space, especially when it's dynamic, so it makes it much easier for them to understand this. Here's currently what we're looking at. So these are 2D whiteboard drawings with a whole lot of textual information. And here's what the future looks like. So realize this is, again, a 2D snapshot of a 3D drawing software, but you can really see here in the top picture, you can see that vertical component of the fight, which is difficult to relate in 2D. I can swivel this view around and look at it from any angle, and I can physically walk through the picture, and then finally I can snap it to the cockpit view over here, where I'm showing the student exactly the relationships that he or she should expect to see the other two aircraft in space, and finally how they can avoid hitting me, hitting the adversary, and making sure that they engage the adversary instead of accidentally me. For VR debrief, we can incorporate all of these concepts that I've already talked about. Rather than the student having to try to remember what it was that they saw in the air, we can show them what they actually saw. All right, we are going to target perception through 3D VR applications. This is where the content component comes into play. So we can develop VR and AR apps that you can take home on your phone and you can watch as many times as possible to gain comprehension of the maneuvers. The most important thing about this is it's 4D and it incorporates the element of time, which is something that's been historically very difficult for us to integrate in 2D drawing. It's expandable in the future with an AI instructor, and it's conceived with a universal game engine. So as the technology evolves, we can take this content that's already been delivered to us and we can move it to a more realistic space with the goal of briefing in augmented reality. So think of that as essentially a hologram that I place on the table so I can preserve the IP to student interaction. The result here is the student's able to recognize side pictures earlier, and we can use those live fly stories to do more advanced maneuvers. We're going to target procedural memory through VR cockpit trainers. Realize this is not a replacement for our current simulators. The advantage of this is it's going to reduce the demand on the current sims, and it's going to increase accessibility because they're placed in the squadron. These are immersive, and the visuals are actually better inside of a mile, so that helps us out quite a bit, and we can pre-record scenarios so that the student can watch the scenario and then try to duplicate it, rather than reading about it, going over to the sim where there's probably not an IP and trying to do what it is that they thought they read about. We can incorporate AI and biometrics in the future, so again, this is completely expandable. The result here is we build a memory of baseline tasks. That way the student, instead of thinking about how to do basic tasks, they're thinking about the overall scenario and they're able to process a more dynamic environment. All right, these two steps of the process here are not part of our current program or the funding that we're asking for, but I think it's important to hit upon it because what we want to do here is not just use VR. We want to use all techniques to optimize human performance. So most of you are probably pretty familiar with this human performance curve. We want to get to this optimum here. And where we get to the most bang for the buck here is increasing cognitive load to the point where performance is at a peak, and we avoid dropping off the edge right here. So how can we do that? There's a variety of non-invasive and semi-invasive procedures that we can use to actually increase performance or find out where that performance peak is and then train at that specific peak. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail right here, but safe to say there's a lot of scientific and medical research that's going into it, including DARPA and some Special Forces already uses some methods here. For the reaction point, we can use targeted training apps. A couple examples right here. All right, overall, this innovation does not happen in a vacuum. We want to work with a lot of partners on base very closely, the number one being maintenance, because we have a number of techniques and developmental goals that are going to be directly in line with maintenance. So we want to work hand in hand. Intel, airfield management, logistics, these are just a few of people that we think we could benefit right here. And we're already partnering with the MQ-9s, F-16, F-15E, FTUs, COM, CVN, and contracting. So a lot of players that we're coordinating with. With that, I'll open up to questions, and I would like to do some technology demonstrations as well. So Colonel Campo, sir, if I could get you over here to view some 360 video. And is anyone else interested in looking at some consumer VR technology? All right, great. Set these right here. Okay, so what I have right here, sir, is basically an app that you can place on your phone, and this is how I envision doing an F-16 walk around. So that 3D model that I was kind of talking about, so I can take it over here, and I can stamp it, and there's a full-size F-16 in the room right here that I can use to train. I'm just going to downsize it a little bit so it's a little bit easier for me to view.
She's flipping those cubes.
I'll just let you take a look at it. So I envision this as a walk-around trainer, and there's a variety of things that you can do with this, including weapons pre-flight. We can really talk in depth about things that you're looking for on the F16.
It's kind of hardware racing.
No, no, this would be incredibly useful for maintenance as well. Right here, what I've basically done is I've stamped an F16 on the table. So this is how I envision a walk-around trainer for pilots, also for weapons pre-flight and stuff like that. So this is a take-home application. You can physically walk around it with your phone and look at certain things, and then you can also size it with this cube and manipulate it. So that's kind of how I envision something that would be as useful for maintenance as well as ops.
Well, your fingers and toes, fingers and toes.
It's actually weird.
One step for pre-flight and launch this primary brief, and then another part of this where we can kind of overlay the video with different checklists or instructional and voiceover video, so you talk to there. I'll show you that they want to take that for a second. Next
She's going to teach you how to do a turn circle entry.
I don't know what.
We don't have a Wizzo for you.
Yeah. Break left, clear.
So your HUD should be roughly slightly off to your left. And it has the focus wheel on the top and on the bottom.
So, boss, you see how the timing needs to get down to the boom, how far back, more than all those people there. So it's the fourth dimension of getting there, how far back to go. Sorry.
Pretty cool stuff.
That's also.
You can still get a lot of still driving me up starving. No issues with you guys.
I think I know it's weird for you to be on offense there.
I'm going to break you. I'm chasing away from standard. Feel space to be.
So if you plan on that thing for about 45 minutes, you know, done before, you'll start getting a little. I don't get air so
Oh, that one.
Yeah, so pop training next we're using this might be the perfect time. Right now we're trying to match up your I have the LiDAR one. Stuff they keep it on. Just like that whole when you do your feeling on that thing. You can't.
Let's talk numbers. I'm seeing, I heard you guys throw numbers there, a couple thousand here. How do I get to 291,000?
She looks so mad.
Okay. If I can bring the slides up again, I have the breakdown of the components for you. So we want 5 briefing rooms in every squadron, and then we'd also like VR cockpit trainers, which are separate from the briefing rooms in each squadron, as well as the TRIZ. Content development, what we want to aim to get is $50,000, and we're planning on pooling those with the other F-16 FTUs so that we can all get as many.
Briefing room, do you need 4K cameras and content that we're talking about? So do I have the baseline investment plus, briefing room 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 follow?
Well, sir, we could do this in a phased approach, or we can invest in it all at the same time. So this is what we're progging out for now. So 2 VR cameras, so we can film offensive and defensive at the same time, so we don't have to fly additional sorties. And then 4 cockpit trainers per fighter squadron. The reason for that is so we can fly a 4-ship, and so we can record 4 ships. And then cockpit trainers for the TRIS. We already have 2 purchased, 5 VR briefing rooms per squadron, which allows us to at least brief a 10 front.
Okay, got it. So we scale it up to 3 squadrons, 5 rooms, is that what we're getting into?
Yes, sir.
If you buy it all at once, though, I mean, you have to be convinced that what you want to do is going to work. If I'm going to scale up right out the door and do 5 briefing rooms times 3 squadrons, are we there that we've got the content and we're on the right path and we're ready to outfit 3 squadrons at once?
Sir, I think that the technology definitely shows a lot of promise, and it's only going to continue to evolve.
Where else did you say they're using this at, other bases?
Yes, sir. They are using it at Seymour Johnson. The A-10s have already invested in this. Obviously, pilot training next. Each of the pilot training bases has a VR room right now that they're using to some extent.
We're over time, so I think that's why the table's been so quiet. For today, we final attack.
Kind of the 3D drawing, if you want to see it pulled up, you can kind of walk around where that AC engagement is.
Sure, I'll take a quick look while the next group sets up. You guys did an amazing presentation. I love it.
Squeeze it all in 15 minutes.
You need help with that, or you got it? I got it.
You got that? You got that? Okay, I'll just I'll sit down then.
Oh, she looks good. How we doing?
They are.
So I think we're. I guess we're
sore from hanging in the hallway, man.
Yeah.
How's your blood sugar coming along?
No, I'm just planning to go run a product. I do want to see this.
We could buy a lot of this.